we're going to make this recording available for you after this webinar. So, and then last but not least, we will share also with you the program of our distant learning programs that we host through Boot Coffee with the help of the Giesen equipment. So, Marcus, welcome, and if you can take the podium, that would be great. And I don't hear you yet, Marcus. So if you are still on mute, maybe you want to unmute.
Thank you, Willem. I always try to stay muted because sometimes it's noisy as I'm preheating my roaster and things. But it's good to see everybody here. And as Willem said, we want to spend a little bit of time talking today about considerations when you're starting and expanding your coffee roasting operation. And I think often the first inclination that folks have, and it's a very important consideration, is what roasting machine do I need to begin with? And, you know, of course, as illustrated on these photos, Giesen has machines of every size, from a sample roaster at, you know, that can roast, 80 or 100 grams at the smallest capacity, up to very large, more commercial machines. But I think, when we're thinking about starting a roasting operation, it's also really important to consider all of the details that go into your operation. And if you're expanding, if you're growing, or if you're just starting out, it's of course more than just the roaster. And for me, it often starts with the facility that I have access to, and how much space do I have to accommodate not just my roasting and packaging operation, but green coffee storage, staging my roasted product, managing receipts and shipments coming and going. As my operation scales, do I need to allow for loaders, destoners, smoke abatement equipment? And of course, what's involved from a construction standpoint with gas and electric. So, this is just a diagram of maybe a typical roasting machine or a roasting plant. And you could imagine this could be as small as one tiny room in the back of a larger facility, or this could be something that represents millions of kilos of coffee a year in production. But you kind of need to account for all of these activities when you're thinking about it, and when you're thinking about your roasting machine. And getting into a little bit of more detail, here's some examples of capacities for a number of Giesen roasting machines, starting from the very smallest, like lab or shop roaster, the W1A, looking at a W6, a W15, and then a W30. And I wanted to put up this slide just to demonstrate with some basic assumptions of your roasted volume loss, your roasted volume per hour, assuming that you can roast 3 batches per hour, which is quite efficient, especially when you consider other activities like preheating, cooling down, cleaning operations in the middle of your shift, and how that translates to your volume capability in an 8-hour day. And I've built this chart working with various clients over the years, because often the inclination is, I want to start my roasting company, I want to get going right now. And all too often, I see folks with capacities that are maybe a little bit smaller than they should be. So I think it's really important to really honestly assess your business plans and goals, and to choose a roaster that's the right capacity for your business operation. You usually gain capacity in a roaster much faster than you spend money, right? So like the jump from a 1.5 kilo roaster to a 15 kilo roaster, you're seeing a 10-time increase in capacity, but you might only be spending for the roasting machine twice as much. So there's a certain economy of scale that comes with that. And then I think, the other piece, of course, to consider is to look at your customer types and what types of capacity, what types of volumes those customers might be going through. Because if you, in your town, land a really busy cafe or a great bakery plant that sells a lot of coffee every single day, they could be going through 100 kilos of coffee in 1 week, or more than 200 pounds of coffee in 1 week. So you can see if you build a few of those customer types and some web sales, maybe some grocery or market sales, you know, pretty quickly, even a 6-kilo roaster might be too small.
And Marcus,
So,
just to interrupt you, by the way, I just sent you a link to the video so you can download that on your end. But maybe just for interesting aspect of planning the roastery and also the expansion, could you go back to the previous slides? Yeah.
Yes.
And so here, I just want to emphasize, you know, when you're planning your roastery with your W6 or your W15 or with a bigger machine, you know, there has to be some logic in how this warehouse, how it is laid out, right? And obviously the roaster and the roasting section takes a very central point in the roastery, but then where you see the green coffee storage and the proximity of that storage to the green coffee receiving area, you know, obviously you want to create a section for your green coffee storage that is protecting this green coffee well. And so typically what you would want to consider is creating some sort of a division between your green coffee storage and the area where your roaster is, specifically the influence of heat and all related aspects like possible smoke that comes free in the process of roasting. So you want to protect your green coffee storage. And then on the other side, you also want to enable some sort of a separated area, well-organized separated area for your roasted coffee storage. Obviously, that all depends on the available space. If we are talking about a roastery that uses a W6, which is Giesen's smallest production roasting machine, then that might not necessarily be the case. But if you're looking at a W15 or a W30 or bigger, then the layout of your warehouse really has to be planned thoroughly. And you can also see in this schematic the functional areas as they are separated between roasted storage and staging, and then the packaging and production area. So I just thought, Marcus, to clarify that to the audience. Please continue.
Oh, thank you very much. And I think, you know, in this diagram, of course, it kind of works in a horseshoe shape. So the flow of product is very logical. It could also be in one side and out the other. There's a number of layouts. And of course, there's things missing, right? We don't have office space. We don't have a lab. We don't have a meeting room to host clients. So these are all activities that you want to be sure to account for. And you know, on this volume thing, of course, the other piece of it is that it's not just your roaster, because as you scale and get into larger and larger equipment, it's important to consider, you know, additional expenses, additional equipment. Hopefully these additional equipments add efficiencies and make your life easier and happier. Having a loader so that you're not having to hoist coffee up very high time and again. A destoner that can capture any foreign objects that might come in your coffee so that you find them before your customers find them in a grinder. Of course, food safe bins or silos or some mechanism to convey the green coffee and the roasted coffee. What are you using for data logging? Of course, we really are fans of the Giesen software for roast profiling. But as your operation grows, you might need an enterprise resource planning tool to manage inventories and stocks and orders and interface with accounting.
So, Marcus, on this photo, where is the loader? Maybe you can highlight some of the equipment that's shown here, because there might be folks who don't really know what they're looking at here.
Yeah, good point. So you'll notice with this roaster, on the left-hand side of the image, we have this pneumatic type system where there's a funnel that feeds up into the green coffee hopper at the top of the roaster. So this is a tool where you would simply weigh and load your green coffee into this device. When you're ready to load that coffee into the green hopper on the roaster, you flip the switch, whoo, and that coffee is conveyed up to the top. So a very efficient tool for managing that. In this case, this photo also has an external Chaff Cyclone to aid in the efficiency of managing your chaff. Because again, as you get larger and larger, what are you going to do with all of the chaff that you produce? The largest commercial roasting companies, they have a line item in accounting of disposing of chaff because they have to pay somebody to take that. So,
and it's interesting to mention, really large roasting operations, they have a machine typically with which they compress their chaff, and they become little pellets, and by itself those pellets have some form of use as manure, or sometimes as food for commercial agricultural operations.
Animal bedding, things like that. I think one of the most interesting uses of chaff, there's a large sort of more commercial coffee roasting company up in Canada, and they invented a Keurig compatible capsule that incorporates chaff into like a bioplastic, and the chaff aids in that being decomposed in compost piles. So people are doing really clever things, but they still need to manage and handle that. So, and of course, it's not just what you have at the roasting machine. When you're thinking of expanding your roasting operation, what does that mean for your production equipment? I was exchanging some text messages with a client and a Giesen W15 user last week. As he's recently opened, I think Rick is on this call, in fact, but he had a client come to him who needed a large volume of ground coffee. And when you get into much larger industrial style grinders, that can be a major investment, not just in a new tool, but even facility operations. Our friends at Equator Coffees down the street from us installed a large liquid cooled roller grinder recently. They had to run more power from the power main out on the street. So these things, as your operation scales, all of these need to be taken into consideration. It's not just your.
And that's a good point, Marcus. I just want to add to that, because during my visit to Giesen, we talked about what are some of the trends with roasting machines and how they are powered, and we see that there is this trend with companies around the world to look more at electrically heated roasters. Partially, there are countries where the governments try to steer consumers away from gas-fired appliances, and so we see there's a kind of this renewed interest in electric. But regardless whether you're gas or electrically operated, with the heating of your roaster, you really want to make sure that roaster can operate within the network, the grid that is available to power those machines. I have had one case where a client didn't realize this on time, was trying to install a W30, a fairly large machine, and his planning was not optimal. So he had to invest in a significantly expensive system of gas lines, and he could have prevented that if he would have chosen a warehouse where this was already present. And that gives you, so always it should give you some pause before you plan your roasting operation to really look at, you know, what is the infrastructure available in the warehouse.
Yeah, 100%. Thank you, Willem. And so, yeah, there's, you know, these warehouse and production type considerations, but, you know, also as your business grows and scales, you know, how might need to upgrade either, you know, cupping supplies and other lab equipment. You know, I think, you know, for me, a color meter is something that you should invest in at the same time you're investing in your roasting machine. But boy, as your facility expands, as you bring on more sophisticated clients, you know, you may bring on customers that specify in the contract with you a very narrow color range for every batch of coffee that you're providing them. The same could be said with grind consistency. So being able to measure grind consistency is another important tool. So, you know, it's the point being, you know, we're not going to get into the full P&L of all of these items, but, you know, when you're looking at your initial investment in equipment, or when you're scoping out a growth plan, you know, don't just stop at the roaster and maybe the obvious production equipment, but think about that contractor that might have to come in and install new gas lines, additional electrical outlets and capacity, and all of the other equipment that goes into making your coffee taste great, right? From the lab.
And I want to mention here that, you know, there is a network of Giesen agents around the world. And these folks are typically selected also for their ability to do more than just help the clients with the roasting expertise and the roasting needs, but also, like David, maybe you want to add to this, because David, you come from more from the espresso side, right? That's where you originally started. And
yeah, I've been in coffee for about 20 years, and 15, 16 of those years is as a technician. So I'm pretty familiar with the equipment side of it, and really come from more of a technical background than the roasting. Roasting is second.
And so when you're located in Pennsylvania, but you obviously work with Giesen clients all over the US and sometimes beyond. And I'm sure you get a lot of questions that go far beyond what a roasting company would look for in terms of their roaster. They might also want your expertise on some related areas, I guess, right?
Yeah, absolutely. So we're covering right now North America, really Canada and the United States for service. A lot of the issues we find with machines are related to not getting the proper power supply. Sometimes it's gas, but more often than not, it's not they don't get the proper power supply to the equipment. So that's a big one, I think, to look for, that Marcus was mentioning, setting that up in the beginning, making sure you have the right one at the space that you'll be in, and maybe planning for growth, you know, if you need to get a bigger machine.
And then I want to add to that we have been working on on a series of videos for roasting companies that install a Giesen machine, and these videos go also into the realm of quality inspection and quality control, and what equipment to use, and what ways of methodologies of inspection to use. And so, you know, what I want to say is that we try, and that Giesen has been very diligent in selecting their agents, and we are kind of Boot Coffee. We function as ambassadors of Giesen. So we try to share more than just the roasting part, but also the expertise around that. Yeah. By the way, we will share the PDF of this presentation, and we have all your contact information, I think. But if for any reason you do not see this roasting presentation arrive, then you can email us at Boot Coffee and at Giesen to request the presentation. The email address you use is info@bootcoffee.com. info@bootcoffee.com. I'll share that email address also.
I'll just put it in the chat window so folks can copy and paste it right out of there.
Yeah. Hey, Marcus, let me know when we can share the video. We created this really cool video. Would be nice to kind of show this. I cannot guarantee that it will stream well, because this is always a challenge with Zoom sessions, but it will be a cool, this is the most recent video that was produced at Giesen, and we did a nice compilation of my impressions of my visits. So let's see if that works, and then we can use that also as a talking point to discuss what Giesen is working on.
Yeah, I think I've got the video queued up. So do you want to preface in any way, Willem, with...
Yeah, so, you know, I went to Holland for a working vacation. My family lives here, my mother lives here, my brother and my sister. And so to stay true to these times of COVID, I chose as my preferred mean of transport the bike, and I actually literally biked from Amsterdam via some cities to the far east of Holland, which is the town of Ulft. That's where Giesen is. I can anyone recommend to do this trip, because Holland is the mecca of bicycles. It's amazing. And I did this trip just this week. My muscles are still having a great time to remind me of that. And so let's see if this video will stream, and we'll make it available also through a link. But let's see if it plays now. It's like 4 minutes or so.
My name is Davey Giesen. I'm the operational manager of Giesen Coffee Roasters, and I am the third generation of our family company, and there's where it all started.
Yeah, my name is Marc Weber, and I'm the global sales manager from Giesen Coffee Roasters. I'm responsible for sales and customers around the world. I take care of the whole sales and customers preparations and customers projects, and I'm also man from the first minute together with the family of Kison, and very happy to follow our ideas and our products, and very proud of it.
What I like to work in this company, and first of all, is to work with all those amazing people what we have here. We have a lot of talented people who are working to make great products for the coffee roaster market. That's when we make a really good product and place it in the market to place that in a customer, it really excites us to see that and to see our coffee roaster in store, and our amazing customers who work with those products, what we made. So that is really what I like the most about my job. Secondly, to improve everyone here at Giesen to make those great products. We want to combine our products with good quality software to make it a good integration with each other. And that's what I think, in combination with our service and support system over the whole world, we can help everybody in 24/7 each week. That makes us the best in the market.
We have different ideas that reach people. We have drum speeds, we have airflow controls, we have variable flame controls, we have the profiler, and this makes it very, very special. And what we see is that the most people like to be different than all the others. So that's why we also step in that area of specialty coffee roasters. We have a good software team in-house. So we have people who develop the software with the ideas from all around the world from our customers. And the point is that we listen to the people, what they need, and we can realize, or we can make that happen with our team here.
So your father must be very proud of you.
I think so. Yeah, I think now 8 years here. So I was also at the beginning when we had a little, I think 25 people around here. So yeah, of course, to work with my father or also with my mother inside the company is really good, and I can also bring some new ideas from my generation to the table. So that is a really nice thing to do. Yes.
Great. I hope it streamed well to you guys. What I was very impressed by in my visit just this week is that there's this ongoing path of innovation going on. I would say one of the aspects that I'm so fond of with Giesen is the fact that the machines are truly made in-house. This is not a company, Giesen is not a company that just buys parts left and right from around the world and puts the machine together once they have all the parts together. No, most of these components are made in-house, and that's really unique. The cast iron components is an aspect that I feel is so good because of the amazing properties of cast iron, and they're actually created in a foundry here in the Netherlands, a company that has been doing this for generations as well. And then what the final aspect that I am very impressed by, and we will dedicate a webinar about this in the near future, is the software, which is far and beyond what you usually see with software that just registers and provides you some ability to interact. Now here, they've truly been trying and been accomplishing to create software that allows you, through so-called triggers and events, to create, as a roast master, a set of logically driven events with which you can tell your roasting machine how to control a profile if certain conditions are met. And we will dedicate a webinar on this, because I think this is where Giesen is on to something very unique. That all combined, I feel, my visit was really cool. Last but not least, what I like, you actually see within Giesen, you see younger generation, young women working on constructing and learning how to do the construction of machines. As you all know, coffee happens to be often, unfortunately, a man's business. And I think, Giesen is really trying to change that paradigm with their staff on the work floor. So that's really, really cool.
Cool.
Marcus, what's next?
Yeah, well, I just had a question for you or for David, which is,
Yeah.
you know, with Giesen and their factory, you had this great tour. What about Giesen customers? Or, you know, is it the kind of place that's open for a customer to come see their roaster being built, to kind of get a little bit of that look behind the curtain? So there's maybe some confidence in preventative maintenance and things?
No, so there is an open door policy. I would say part of what Giesen's approach is to allow a high level of customization of roasting machines, which means, you know, machines are made specifically for you, the client, with specific features. Maybe David, do you have offhand some examples of how those customizations can happen? Do you have an example of that with some projects?
Yeah, I mean, the most common way that it would be customized for the majority of the roasters that are sold, which would be the 6 or the 15 kilo roasters, it's color is the most popular for sure. I think choosing a color that, you know, might be a theme with your retail bags or your storefront, or maybe match your espresso machine or something like that. I would say that's the biggest. And then, like, you can see in your background the roof of the roaster. You can change that from stainless steel to brass or like a hammered finish, and even the logo on the side. Those are the most popular ones. And then when you get into the bigger machines, then of course it could be, you know, customized in a different way for the larger 60 or, you know, bigger machines.
Yeah. David, what's the current range of roasters that Giesen makes? So you start with the sample roaster, and then what sizes are there after the sample roaster?
So the WPG1, and then the W1, the W6.
And the number indicates the batch capacity, right? In kilo.
So
right?
Correct. Yeah. So the 1 kilo. The sample roaster will do 50 to 200 grams, which is, you know, should be sufficient for that. The cool thing about the sample roaster, though, is it will the way that you interact with the roaster on the sample roaster is the same as you scale up with the equipment. So I think that's cool. And so it would go W30, W45, W60, and then 140, I believe.
And in the video, there is actually a couple of shots with me standing in front of the 140, which is a beast. It's a machine that roasts 2 full green coffee bags per batch, and actually a little bit more, but still with the same cast iron faceplate. It's very impressive. Yeah. I think there's a couple of questions.
I see a couple of raised hands, but perhaps if you have a question, it's easier to type them into chat, right? Then.
Yeah. So if you have questions, just use the chat, please. That would be great. So we're going to work on, you know, this is a popular question that I get from, that we get from clients, that let's say a client is working with a roasting machine from brand ABC. Now, you know, now they realize that with the Giesen, they have more potential success, and now they move on to, let's say, a Giesen 15 kilo after they've been working for a couple of years with another brand. So there's always the question, you know, how do you translate your roasting profile that you have been working on a previous machine? How do you translate that to your new Giesen? And And the same question, of course, when you move on from a smaller Giesen to a bigger Giesen, how does that translation work? Which is, of course, a bit simpler than if you come from a different brand of machine altogether. And I would say when it comes to understanding your opportunities to translate a roasting profile, then it really requires you to look in depth at what you are really doing in terms of your roasting. And where there are a number of key phases that you must be able to distinguish in your roasting, and a number of key parameters that you must be able to identify. And I will just outline these parameters to start with, and then maybe Marcus, then you can comment more on this. But here we're actually looking at a screen print of a roast done using the Giesen software, the Giesen Roast Profiler. And in this, here in this picture, we're looking at basically 4 of the key parameters for the roasting, which is the air temperature, which is in blue, that is the roast air temperature. Then we're looking at the, in red, at the bean temperature, how it evolves during roasting. Then in yellow, we're looking at the rate of rise. That's the increase in bean temperature over time. That's basically every 30 seconds that roasting is going on, the Giesen software continually calculates what that rate of rise is. So the rate of rise is kind of the speedometer of your roasting machine. It tells you how fast you're moving through the roasting, and it is a great prediction tool as well. And then last but not least, there is that aspect of the power, which is basically the flame output or the heat output of the flames, which you see on the green line, and that's usually a percentage base. And so maybe Marcus, would you like to add some more comments where it comes to the software?
Yeah, I think 100%. And we'll do a live roasting demo in a minute where we'll see some of these things played out in real time. But I think, for me, and as Willem said, there's some really important things about matching profiles. And there's the kind of bean temperature, thermocouple, like data aspect of it that you're receiving from a tool like the Giesen Profiler. But on the other side of it, there's what is happening with the coffee, right? You're trying to match one coffee across multiple roasting machines. And I think it all starts with roast color, right? If you can get the roast color right, that's kind of the first like meta goal that you should have. But then, beyond that, it's having access to a tool and a sophisticated profiler that can help you understand the time that your coffee is spending in various roasting phases. So, over your total roast time, what percentage of that was spent drying from the time you charge your green coffee until you clearly see that all of that coffee has undergone the color change to kind of a yellow color. The smell in the dryer goes from having any hints of kind of wet grass to being dry, just like hay or straw. That would kind of be the first phase. Then you have that entire middle phase where those kind of early browning reactions are happening. Then you hit first crack, and then everybody talks about development time, right? What percentage of time do you have from first crack to the end of your roast? So I think having a tool that can help you understand and measure those phases as a percent of the total roast is another key element. Moving from one roasting machine to another, your roast times might be quite different. Now, I just for fun put up a roast profile here from an Ikawa sample roaster. And I firmly believe I can translate a profile from the Ikawa to the Giesen if I understand these roast phases and I match the color. And I understand, as Willem said, the green line here on this profile, my application of heat. And what that means to me is, like in this case, this is a roast that has a fairly gentle and consistent heat application through most of the roast, versus something where there's a little bit more heat at the beginning and a more aggressive step down. So is it kind of a gentle approach? Is it a more aggressive approach?
Could you explain that a little bit more? So what does the gentle approach mean in practice, Marcus?
Yeah, so you can see here, this coffee, it happens to be a coffee from a good friend and a client, Monarch Coffee. They're a producer in Hawaii that grows geishas and other kind of novel varieties for that island. And the coffee is really hot. It's hard to bring color into. It takes a very delicate approach to avoid scorching and tipping. So in this case, you can see I started with, as we covered in the last session, a little bit of a longer soak. So my gas was off at the beginning of the roast. I had a high enough charge temperature to get things started, but not so high that it would just allow the roast to take off. And then I gradually stepped on my gas. In this case, I only went to 40%. And I allowed that 40% gas to kind of push right up to, about 2 minutes before first crack, before taking a gentle step down and then another gentle step down in my gas percentage to kind of round out my roast. So I can get this nice controlled rate of rise. I get a nice controlled shape to my curve. In this case, I really need to extend the sort of later Maillard reactions just before first crack, before cutting, as caramelization is getting underway, in order to bring any color to this coffee. It's an approach where it's just kind of like lightly keeping my foot on the gas pedal, if we want to compare it to driving a car, versus an approach like this, where I kind of gun it. I still have a soak, but I step quite aggressively up to a much higher power. And then I kind of come off the gas much more dramatically as well.
Yeah, and we talked about heat soak and the concept of heat soak in our previous webinar. And there is a recording was made that can be that you can request if you email us or Giesen, and we'll send you the link. That was a really cool webinar about that. Yeah. Yep. Are we? Marcus, are we going to do some roasting?
Yeah, let's do some live roasting.
Yeah, cool.
The goal for this live roasting session, in some ways, is to kind of prime us for a more sophisticated discussion about the roast profiler. Willem mentioned triggers and the trigger function. I see in the chat window, Rick Appleton has asked about, can we talk about the trigger function? That's coming. That'll come in a future webinar. But I think before triggers really start to make sense, it's important that we all have a good, strong sense of what the set point means and how that works when we're roasting. So, if I load up my Giesen profiler here, and I have a profile queued up, I'll just load it so we can see what that looks like. You can see here I have a set point at 408 Fahrenheit. And then I just bump it up a little bit at the end. But this is a fairly low set point. And as we start roasting, we'll see what happens. But on the recorded profile, using the auto burner function of my roaster, you can see how the gas is really kind of feathered throughout the roast in order to keep that consistent air temperature. And I chose this 408 degrees knowing that that's a temperature that's a little bit lower than the temperature at which the exothermic reaction happens for this coffee. So we're pretty close to the starting point. So without any further ado, I am going to start roasting.
Right. And so maybe just to explain you, the audience, set point of 408 degrees is a set point for the air temperature. So that's the environment that we create for the coffee that is now loaded in the roaster. And that set point adjustment is being used in this example for this webinar as an approach to accomplish a profile. And we see upon loading the beans, the roast is going on now. Upon loading the beans, we see that the bean temperature is still going down. It's basically the thermocouple for the bean temperature is now registering the beans temperature, which is of course relatively cold, relatively cool. The rate of rise is now already increasing, so the beans are now absorbing heat. We are running at 30% flame capacity at a speed of the drum of which is driven by 50 hertz of power, which corresponds to a certain number of revolutions. And we're doing this at an air pressure of 120 PA. So just to give you that explanation.
And I'm so happy to see, of course, I recorded this profile this morning as the first roast batch of the day. And here we are, the roaster's been idling now for a few hours. So we can see that the bean temperature is actually coming in quite a bit hotter. It's really doing a good job of following the air temperature. But we can also see that my rate of rise is lower on this roast than on my reference. It's coming up again a little bit. But we'll sort of see how the software is going to be able to react and adjust and perhaps bring this profile back in line with what I had recorded. Or if I need to take some steps on my own. And you can see I have my burner set at the auto setting right now, which is basically allowing the roaster to use the full capacity from a burner that's turned off all the way to, as it is right now, the full 100%. This is a full capacity roast batch, so 200 grams. If I was only roasting 50 grams, I would choose a much lower burner setting. But here it's great. I can see my power now has been decreased to 60%. If we compare that down here on the chart, you can see that the recorded profile, it actually let it ride at 100% for another maybe 10 seconds. So the machine is making adjustments to try to maintain this environmental temperature without exceeding 408 degrees, which is my set point.
There's a question from Rick Appleton. Can you mention the settings for Maillard on crack and drying temperature?
Yeah, so one of the things that I like about the Giesen profiler is that as you get to know your coffee, you can actually step into the settings here and you can give it a temperature, this is in Celsius, for when you want to consider the end of the drying phase. So I've roasted this coffee quite a lot. And I know that right now, if you can see my dryer, the coffee's starting to take on some color. It's a little bit yellow, but this is a coffee that actually does not sort of technically enter that Maillard phase or that middle phase of the roast until a little bit hotter than other coffees. So I set the trigger for that. This trigger is the wrong word because that's a technical aspect to the profiler, but I set the indicator for that in my profiler at 325 Fahrenheit, which is that 160 and some change Celsius.
And
so
then
you can see.
And just to comment to that, the Maillard phase is the phase where we get a complex set of chemical reactions within the coffee, and that happens when the coffee enters into the range of 280 degrees Fahrenheit and up, which is, what is that, 150, 160 degrees C, correct?
Yeah, I said it. You can see here the Maillard on this particular coffee has just started.
Yeah.
This trend line, green to orange. I actually said we sort of know chemically that should be happening in most coffees at closer to like 150 Celsius. or something like 280, 290 Fahrenheit. In this particular coffee, I know that I don't sort of have the sensory experience of that until quite a bit higher temperature. So I elected to set that point higher when I'm roasting this coffee in the profiling tool. But it is nice because it does give you that sort of specific temperature point. And I just have some observations here. If you look at this profile, the solid green line versus the dotted line, you can see that I'm at 10% power for a much larger portion of the roast on this playback of the profile versus the original time that I recorded it. And that is because there was more energy in the machine. The machine is running a little bit hotter. So in an attempt to account for that, it's not using as much flame. I also want to just draw attention that I chose to increase the air pressure for this particular coffee from 120 pascals to 160. And that change was just automatically accommodated by the roaster. And I wanted to bring that aspect into it, this discussion of set point, because when you start changing airflow and air pressure, you can get some very unpredictable results in your rate of rise and your temperature curve, depending on where your flame is. And so by allowing the software and sort of trusting that the computer is going to be able to respond more quickly than I am as an operator, that gives me some flexibility, and it gives me the ability, as I am now, to focus more on my coffee than having to kind of watch and worry too much about roaster controls. Of course, I can come in here and say, I want less power, and I can take this from auto down to a lower setting if I wanted. But overall, I can really kind of let it ride. And I'm just hearing first crack now, so it's still coming in a little bit earlier. I'm going to go ahead and record that.
I like the way the different colors indicate these different phases or the different zones of heat as well. It's really illustrated very well, the software.
Yeah, and this, when we're done, we can sort of leave this up because this is still ongoing, so these numbers are very dynamic. But at the end of the roast, we'll see something like a 13 or 14% development time. This coffee from Geisha Village benefits from a very compact development time and a faster roast. But what we'll be able to see is the percentage of development time, that middle percentage or mid percentage, and then that earlier sort of drying time as a percentage of the total roast. And I think that's, you can see here, my set point is now being increased slightly because I've got this very low rate of rise here at the end of the roast, and I just want to make sure that I'm keeping it moving forward. Some may call that a flip and would be concerned about it. I'm not actually too concerned about that. And I'm smelling my coffee. I'm looking at my reference sample. We're done. So I'm going to get the coffee out of here.
All right. Cool. Great. This was an example of a roast profile driven by the adjustment of the set point of the air temperature set point. And this is just one approach, part of various approaches. And here you can see the summary of what we just did. You can see the indeed that kind of interesting pattern for the burner that was just maintaining that 408 degrees temperature for a major part of the roast, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
It's so powerful because, there are environmental conditions that change. I came in at 7 a.m. this morning and it was quite cold outside and the sun was kind of behind clouds and smoke of the fires we have here. But now the sun's just streaming in, the day is cleared up, it's much warmer in the roasting facility. So using the set point, it gives me just one more tool for consistency and for kind of my artistry as a roaster to make sure my profiles are on track the way that I want.
Great. Boy, time moves fast when you have fun. David, you want to add anything before we say goodbye to our friends around the world? Unmute, David. We cannot hear you.
Sure. No, thank you very much for helping put this together, and I wish I could be there with you to ride a bike and see the factory. And thank you, Marcus, for that. That was very, very helpful. I really, really like the software from Giesen, and I think it's a great tool and add-on to the equipment. So I think people will appreciate that if they haven't gotten a chance to play around with it. I think you definitely should.
Well, thanks, David. Where we bring not just set point, but these triggers into play, because I'm really excited to learn more about them as well. And I'm so glad Willem got a rundown from the experts at Giesen while he was there.
And there's a couple of questions from Rick, and but he is from Johan to all panelists. What does Marcus get with 16% of development in terms of the cup profile? So if you have 16% RD, what can you typically expect in terms of the flavor in the cup?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's complicated because roast development and roast color kind of go hand in hand, right? So for this roast, which is pretty similar to a cupping roast, when I measured my reference on our color meter, it was an Agtron of 60, and and at that kind of medium roast level near the midpoint temperature, I'm expecting a coffee that's quite bright, that's kind of showcasing those enzymatic characteristics of the coffee, those kind of flavors that are driven by the acids, fresh fruit, kind of a clean candy sweetness, not getting into caramelized sugar flavors too much. If I extend that more to 20%, with probably a slightly darker roast color as well, I would expect bringing more of those vanilla, chocolate, caramelized sugar characteristics up front. But it depends on the coffee that you're roasting. This coffee, many times its sweet spot is between 10 and 12%, which for other coffees would just taste like cereal if you had such a short development time.
And then there was a question from Hinok. Does the software do green stock data? I can answer that it does not. Not yet, at least, but not currently. And
enterprise resource planning tool would be, something in addition to the Giesen software. And there's companies out there doing that for coffee, or just more general programs that you can develop or purchase off the shelf.
And then Rick asked, what pressure ranges can you use before the beans get pushed out of the exhaust? It's basically, the question is, if you're setting your PA very high, then indeed at a very high setting, you will lose beans and they will end up in the Chaff collector, most likely. So I recommend not to go beyond 180 to 200 PA, because then you can, with a full batch, you can end up with a beans in your Chaff collector. My column that's coming out is dedicating to drum revolutions and the adjustments of the drum speeds in order to do profiles, and we will make that into also the next topic. So how can you use the drum speeds supported by the air pressure to create unique profiles? That will be really cool. That's the last Friday of September. Marcus, you want to just put up the slide where folks can see and get more training if they like to?
Absolutely. So yeah, just if these are topics that I think folks are interested in much more depth, at bootcoffee.com/webinar, you can find our paid programming, where we talk about these things, not just specific to the Giesen roasters, although it's a great way to get in more depth with your Giesen.
And these so these are all distant learning webinars. And for the these workshops, we typically use the Giesen equipment also as the learning tool and as the explanatory tool. But you learn in the roasting business fundamentals, you learn about the whole gamut, or the whole range of practices and also business tools that you need to be able to focus on. Roast profiling is very specifically focusing on profiling, and then how to score when you're doing cupping with the SCA form is also really helpful. I think we're gonna finish this because we're over time, but it was a good time spent. Thank you, Marcus. It was really cool. Thank you, David.
Thanks, guys.
Especially Giesen friends around the world, in the US and beyond. We will see each other again. Stay healthy. Enjoy your time, and good luck, and we will be in touch. Bye-bye.
See you. Safe travels.
Thank you. Bye-bye.